Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Otrebor from avant-garde black metal band Botanist to the podcast. Botanist released Paleobotany on May 17th via Prophecy Productions. Otrebor talks about learning various instruments, trying to play grindcore on the hammered dulcimer, incorporating nature themes into his music, his love of Prophecy Productions, and a lot more. Absolutely love Botanist, and Paleobotany is a huge step forward for the band. If you haven't checked it out yet, you should. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of As the Story Grows. If this is your first time to the podcast, I would love it if you hit the subscribe button on your podcast platform listening of choice. You can find links in the show notes or at asthestorygrows.com to our Discord server to sign up for our mailing list and to support the show financially and get early access to every episode on Patreon. I'm currently listening to this book called Filter World and How Algorithms Shape Culture and What We Listen to. And it's just a reminder to share what you love. So if you listen to this podcast and think you have a friend or a Facebook group that might enjoy it, go ahead and share it with them. Word of mouth recommendations is the best way to share and show your support for the show. I have been on vacation out of the country, and in that time, there have been a bunch of YouTube comments. So thank you so much for leaving comments. Over on chapter 474, Pancho Caldwell wrote, Leah is really talented, making music on her own terms. It's great music too. On chapter 500 with Chris from Like Moths to Flames, Moto Medics wrote, my favorite band, and I hope they tour soon for this new album, because goddamn, they never miss. On chapter 473 with Damien from The Requiem, Adventures of Kahlua and Fendi wrote, love this band. And on chapter 390 with Josh from Society's Finest, and I the Drunkers wrote, that was cool AF. Thanks so much for leaving a comment, sharing your opinions on the different episodes and the podcast. If you leave a comment, I will read it on the podcast. So whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Discord, or other forms of communication, leave a comment and I will read it on the pod. Enjoy getting to know Otrebor from Botanist. Did you grow up in California?
I did.
Yeah. What was growing up like?
I mean, it's a lot different than it is now, at least from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's certain parts of the city that remind me of when I was a kid, but largely it's a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I'm living just outside DC now. This is roughly where I grew up. But like I moved away and then moving back, everything is completely different. It's like so much has changed and it's just crazy. Yeah, you know. What got you into music?
Oh gosh, probably cool older kids when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That played bands that I thought were awesome. And I just got into like metal that way. Yeah. And I got into other stuff, other ways. You know, I probably classical music, probably through my parents or through other people's parents, or just listening to it hearing it on the radio or hearing it on a record. Yeah. And then other stuff just kind of snowballs from there. You know, like I'm into dark wave music. I like cold wave music because I grew up in the 80s. So I really like, I just like bummer music in general. Yeah. So anything that was sort of like that is going to appeal to me. So since I grew up in the 80s and I like the darker stuff, like the darker pop music that came out then, the new wave stuff and the gothy stuff, like the proto-goth or the post-punk music that came out then, anything that sounds like that or reminds you of that is going to be a hit. Yeah. I'm into synth wave because, again, probably John Carpenter movies turned me on to that sound, and then it's like, oh, this is totally great. You know, it's like that, but now it's progressed a lot. So I'm into stuff like that.
Yeah, you get the keyboard stabs with the delay, and you're just like, yes, that does it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your first instrument?
Drums, for sure.
Drums, yeah.
Yeah. My fantasy was I would play drums in a band, and I would contribute the drumming parts, and everyone would contribute equally to this whole, and everyone would work as this like well-oiled machine team, which was pretty naive. I'm sure somebody's band works that way, but it tends. My experience is that that's not really what how bands work or how teams work, and that there's a lot of perceptions that I had that are still being debunked. Like, you know, because you grow up or you exist as a fan and you see all these bands and their photos and their lineups, and I would imagine them working as these teams, and like that's not really. There tends to be one or two people that do most of the stuff.
Yeah,
and then the other people fill it out, which is fine. It actually makes the thing work better. Yeah. But yeah, so I thought I'd play drums in a band and just contribute the drums, and it just wasn't really working. It wasn't working to my level of ambition.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I needed to do it on my own, but I played drums, so I had to figure something else out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I remembered I saw somebody busking with a dulcimer, and I went to go try one, and it was like, I could do this. It's not hard for me. Like, I can take my skill set and transpose it to a percussive melodic instrument.
Yeah.
And then I started branching out into other things that had a relatively flat learning curve. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that playing the piano is really easy, but holding down keys in time is pretty easy.
Yeah.
With a rudimentary understanding of what the keys do, and composing on them or holding them down in time is not hard for me anyway. And then I started being able to get into with my fingers, like I can hit them with some reasonable amount of performance in time. And that was cool. And then, you know, like remedial bass guitar playing was also pretty easy. The first time I ever played bass was the first time I recorded bass. I just picked it up and it's like, where do I push to make this pitch? And then I can move my finger in time and just push the next pitch. And it wasn't particularly hard. Again, playing bass really well takes a lot of practice.
Right.
It's not just you can pick up the bass and play it, but in terms of hitting notes in time on a basic level, I can do all that stuff. So that's how I sort of gradually branched out onto stuff.
Yeah.
And then the vocal part was just like doing whatever I thought I could at first, and then getting some good feedback and encouragement from, it was actually Bezalith from Lotus Thief that told me that I could hit pitches well. I'm not going to claim that I can sing well, but I can do things basically.
Yeah.
And I know when it doesn't sound right, and I have to do it again and again. So again, it's just like all basic stuff that I put together to make something that is what it is. And the most complication really is the drumming, because that's where I have the most ability to sort of make that the foundation of any sort of convolution, and then everything else follows suit on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure the advent of digital recording and the ease of digital recording has made it easier to experiment and try new things. And it
really does. Yeah.
Well, that doesn't work. Delete.
Absolutely. Yeah. It really does.
So that was the genesis for Botanist. Just like, I can do this myself.
I can do this myself. Yeah, I need to do this myself because I still do, but especially in the earliest years, I was going really fast with how much recording I was making. Like, I made the first 6 records in the span of 2 years.
Oh wow!
Because it was just me, and I know that also, like, if I was going to make another record all by myself from the beginning, it wouldn't take me that long. It would probably, I mean, like Selenotrope, I made all by myself. But it, like, half the time was recording the vocals, again, because I'm not that good. but I wanted it to be good, and I wanted it to end up good. So it just took me that long to be able to track all those vocals. And I mean, I'm mostly talking about the clean parts. The whisper parts are pretty easy. I get them in 1 or 2 takes, and I'm done. Yeah. But the clean parts, especially the canon choral part in the middle of the Flowering Dragon, that's got like 8 vocal layers, and they're all doing different. Well, there's 3 different parts superimposed on one another. And it took me like 5 or 6 tries where I deleted everything. Like, this is terrible. I can't. So delete everything, start again, and then like delete everything, and like tried this, that, and it was different each time till I got the final things. Like, this is presentable. I can put this on the record.
That's funny. Yeah, it's just a process of learning and trying. And
yeah.
How'd you come up with the name for the project?
It was the idea because I am very motivated by classical art in general, and then the intersection with botany is it's from growing up with an avid gardener, like an aesthetic gardener, and hearing about all the Latin names and seeing all the plants, and then seeing the classical art of that at different times, and then putting that intersection in my mind. Like, I really like all this nomenclature, and I really like the art, and I actually love the plants and being out and seeing them. So, and I, my upbringing is metal in terms of what motivates me musically. Like, I love lots of stuff. Like I was talking about a cold wave. Like, I'd love to, again, play drums in a cold wave band. It'd be fantastic, or do something different. And I do. Like, I've been in different kinds of bands, but the stuff that really like motivates me to make a record right now and let's go is metal. And it's been different types over the years, but for the past 10 years, it's largely been black metal. Yeah. So when I started the Botanist thing, it was like, well, I want to do this. I want to make, actually, it was supposed to be a grindcore project when I first thought of it. It was going to be me on drums and somebody else on guitar and vocals. I was like, oh, Pig Destroyer is totally rad. They only have 2 or 3 people in the band, at least when I saw them at, 15 years ago. And it was great. They don't need a bunch of people. Like, it'd be great to have like a really minimal band, but I really like, for some like seemingly random reason, I was also impassioned by botanical nomenclature. So I was like, well, it'd be cool if someone took all this nomenclature and made that the basis of a band. Like, Carcass did it with the medical, forensic pathology encyclopedia or dictionary. Somebody should do this with the botanical dictionary. It'd be awesome. Yeah. And so that's where it started from. But it's like, but it can't just be about plants. Like, there has to be a different, like, if it's going to be informed by metal, especially bummer metal, it can't just be about plants. There has to be like an aspect to it. And like, what's the misanthropic aspect of this band and the project? And so that's where I came up with the idea, or the idea came to me, of this insane botanist that loses his mind when he sees the destruction of the natural world because of mankind's meddling and stumbling, and retreats into himself and into nature, and hears the voices of the plants that tell him about how things are going to go and how mankind will erase itself, and that he can help a little bit with mankind's self-effacement, and that as his final reward, he will also die, but he will then become one of the continuum, like the hive mind of all the plants. He will effectively become a plant and live in bliss forever. So all this stuff I channel basically from myself. I mean, it's part of me. It's also comes from a place I don't really know. Like, I just sort of let it come in, and then it comes out in the music. Yeah.
Yeah. What then led you from grindcore to black metal?
I decided I made a bunch of drum tracks that were sort of in my weird perception and my weird like image of grindcore. I made a bunch of drum tracks, right? So you look at the first couple Botanist records that were released together, the tracks tend to be a lot shorter. Like, the shortest one is 7 seconds. And I did that on purpose. It's like, Napalm Death put out, however many grindcore bands put out 3-second songs. Like, I'm going to put out a 6-second song or something. Right. Just fun. And to do it. But the tracks tend to be like a minute, minute and a half. 45 seconds, something like that. So that's definitely informed by grindcore. But ultimately, like, I was doing it with a hammered dulcimer, and it was the first major revelation of like dispelling of naivete that you can't really make grindcore with a hammered dulcimer, or you can, I guess, but it's not going to sound like grindcore. It's kind of like the hammered dulcimer barely sounds like you can't make heavy hammered dulcimer. Yeah. It's very, very difficult because it's heaviness has a great deal to be able to do with playing power chords. And playing power chords on a dulcimer it's much harder to do, and it just has a more airy, wispy sound to it. So one of my original like naive thoughts was I can just play hammered dulcimer and run it through guitar amps, and it'll be just like a guitar, but it's not at all. So it was that, and my heart is more aligned with black metal. Like I said, I love Pig Destroyer. I love some Napalm Death. I love some power violence. Like I love Friendship from Japan. I think they're awesome. But in terms of the music that I just naturally was writing, it's not necessarily grindcore music at all. So those first two records are informed by grindcore, but that got pretty much abandoned after those first two, which, I mean, I love those records. I'm never going to make them again, and that's great on all counts. So that was the transition. I think it was the spirituality and the emotional quality that I get from black metal, and I really tap into the romantic aspect of black metal. Like, I see the black metal that resonates the most with me. I see a very major parallel with romantic era philosophy and art. In terms of this drawing power from being alone in the woods and feeling like God is in the woods, and God is actually quite scary, and whatever that presence is very fearsome, and that kind of thing is resonated individually with each person that goes into nature and draws that power or that fear from the forest or from nature or from desert or whatever natural environment there is. Yeah. Like, a lot of bands that were seminal were channeling that feeling, that primordial awe and fear of the divine through nature, whether they were making a direct parallel to that period or not. It was like, and I love that kind of art and literature. So that really resonated with me, and it just fell together with this concept.
Nice. How'd you get connected with Prophecy Productions?
I started talking. So Martin Kohler is the guy that owns and runs the label. I connected with him actually quite some years ago, probably around 10 or more, because we sort of flirted with signing the band to the label, and it just wasn't really the right time at that time. Like, various things weren't necessarily lining up. Because I can't remember exactly who contacted who, but for sure there was enthusiasm on both ends, but it just wasn't lining up at the time. So then when things came around again around 2020 or 21, I think it was 21, I reconnected with Martin because I was looking to shop Selenotrope. And he's like, "Yeah, I really want to put this out, and I want you to put out this amount of records and put out some back stuff." And it just seems like it's a pretty good fit. I think it's probably the best fit. Well, I would say Flenzo is a really good fit, but in a different way. And other things. I mean, we were on Avant-Garde for a couple records, and I thought that was really cool too. And but Prophecy is a really good fit in terms of it being an intersection of dark music, heavy music, and like arty music. Yeah. Like, that has some fluff to it. Like, and that fluff is expressive and artistic. And that's what I really like about the record. I mean, I hope it doesn't seem offensive to say it has fluff to it, but I really like that sort of soft side that even their hardest bands have. So that works really well.
Yeah. Yeah, they're such an interesting label because anytime I get a record, I'm like, everything looks like it's super black metal. And then it's like this crazy folk music you've never heard before. And it's like always interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I can say confidently that Prophecy, maybe avant-garde too, but are the labels that I've been on where it's like, I like a lot of the bands on that label. There's always labels that I like. I like something on the label that I've been on, but like Prophecy is probably the one like maybe 50-60% of what they put out. Like, I want a copy of that.
Yeah. New album's called Paleobotany. What led you to that as the title, this kind of study of ancient plants?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it's talking about plants that existed in the prehistoric times, some of which still exist today, like Protea and Magnolia still exist. And there is one which we wrote about, Willemia. One of the songs is called Willemia. I think the full name of the plant is Willemia nobilis. But that was a plant that existed a long time ago and was thought extinct, and they found it in a gorge in somewhere in Australia. And so that was a big botanical revelation that was found. But what led to it was kind of some happy accidents. I mean, we might have eventually gotten to this anyway, because I tend to like to have discrete concepts from record to record, and they can range from very conceptual to loosely conceptual. But this is a pretty conceptual record in that sense. But so the happy accident was our bass player, Tony, and I are both fans of the Russian band Show Me a Dinosaur.
Yeah.
And they put out a record called Plant Gazer.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has anything to do with Botanist or not. I didn't ask them, but I know that they like Botanist too. And so we're like, we're really excited about Show Me a Dinosaur. What if we asked them, or somehow Tony asked them if they would do a split with us? And everyone was excited about it. And so we said, well, they're called Show Me a Dinosaur. So it'd be kind of a sort of homage to them, and also in terms of our split, to make it all about dinosaur plants. But what happened was the split didn't happen. Like, it was like things didn't line up very well. Like, they were excited, we were excited, but they had a different timetable that we did, and they have like another band, and they were busy doing something, and we were ready to go like sooner than they were. So we decided to make a full record of it. So I made 5 more tracks, and there you have the album. So then it became the Dinosaur Plant record, and it's Paleobotany.
Were there things you did differently in the recording of this record than you've done previously? Because it sounds like the production's really stepped up a little bit.
Well, the production has to do a lot with, ultimately has to do with Frederick Nordstrom, who worked with us on Ecosystem, on the Ecosystem version A, like the main version of Ecosystem. But I think that on top of that, production-wise, what progressed it was Tony had a hand in the production, and he crafted all the dulcimer tones. Like, I gave him the raw dulcimer files, and he distorted them using his own method, his own treatment to them, which gives it a flavor. And then when we mixed the record with Fred, Mara came along too, and Mara had some important input in how to bring the dulcimer tone out a little bit more, in that we mixed in the clean, one of the clean tones in the dulcimer to give it a little bit more attack and a little bit more snap to it. So that helped make things sound the way they did. And also the way Tony panned them was a little bit of a different thing that we had done before. But in terms of production, that was really it. I mean, also Fred may have had a little bit more experience now, because anyone that approaches Botanist for the first time, no matter what they've done, is kind of a new experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you want me to do with this? It's like, and so you have to know what you want, and you have to know how to tell him what you want.
Yeah.
And so I think that made it what it helped made it what it is. So I have to, a lot of credit to also my bandmates, because I've learned what I want, but there's still a gray area of like, I'm not really sure what I want with this like specific thing. And then they're like, try this, and then that's what worked. So yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Who did the album artwork for this album?
Their names are Veronica Steiner and Brian. Hang on a second. Brian Surway.
Okay.
We found them on Instagram. Actually, Mar found them on Instagram. And I like both their style, but what really drew me to them was they had made artwork previously as a collaboration. And their distinct styles together worked really well. Like, I want you to make something like this, but for our album cover. And I wanted to have this element and this element. And so, we contacted them, and they renewed their collaboration, and they made us a couple pieces.
Nice.
And cool. I'm happy to give you their links later on.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it seems like as like cruddy as social media can be, like a lot of people are finding like rad artwork on Instagram, and it's finding its way into album artwork these days a lot.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's a delicate balance because I'll see like album art, like that's amazing, and then it's like I really want to contact that person, but then it turns out that they've made, and this is not a knock to anybody, but it just is what it is that they've made like 15 bands album art, and you start to recognize them because they're popular. Yeah. And that's cool, except so that because the balance is like finding someone that isn't totally overused or hasn't been used a lot. It's like, oh, there's another one of those, and then finding someone who is really good and also is very professional. So, the professionality is not the stuff that anyone should be, concern themselves with, but in the back, sort of in the backstage is how quickly do they work? How well do they work? How well do they listen? And deadlines and presentation, and like when you present the full package, like what's it going to be like? And that's when you get people that are prolific, you're going to get a better professionality for sure. Because they keep getting used, for example.
Yeah. You've put out a lot of music, a lot of records over your career as Botanist, and it seems like people like you and me like albums, like to create, like to listen to music in that format. But have you ever considered like changing the way you release music as, digital music has taken over and like, I don't know, people's attention span have changed? Or is it just like you're creating for you and what you want to hear and put out in the world?
It's mostly that. I mean, taking it one step further is when I first started the band, my goal was to have a physical product that I could have on my CD shelves or record shelves or whatever. And I also wanted that physical product to make its way somewhere to be available for somebody I didn't know to find it and go, this is really cool. Even if it was just one person, like that's what I wanted. So when I got signed to Tumult, and Andy from Tumult said, I want to put out your record because it's weird and rad. I remember feeling like I've already achieved everything I wanted to do. Feeling something that comes out only in digital media. I mean, it's not like I wouldn't do it because I like making records. So that's the most important thing. But I like physical media, and especially with music, like other things that I consume, whether I have the physical media or not, it doesn't really matter to me. But the records makes a difference to me. But what are you seeing, Brian, in terms of your thoughts or you're seeing with trends or alternate ideas?
Oh, I just know a lot of, maybe not newer bands who've been doing it for a while, going to the single model, even in the metal space, a lot of YouTube videos. I mean, as a fan, I like listening to music on CD and vinyl and cassette. Like I like the record as a format still, but I've seen people change to try to just like, you can put the same amount of material out just in shorter bursts, and always be there in front of people. But I mean, it's not like you're not releasing music all the time. So
yeah. I mean, I think there's a tricky financial aspect to it too.
Right. Yeah.
When you mentioned cassettes, like I think cassettes are a pretty cool way to release. It's a good intersection again of like it's fairly inexpensive to put out. You don't have to make a ton of them and still get a good per unit cost. You don't have to charge all that much for them.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be all that elaborate. And people, especially in more underground music scenes, people get excited about them. And if you can sell enough, it helps you offset the cost, because like releasing things digitally isn't free unless you can somehow do everything yourself and have no cost.
Yeah.
So you have to get your money back, and people will buy the downloads for sure. But like, if you can then make even more money to offset your costs of just releasing digital by having cassettes or some sort of short run that will profit you. I don't know, like, do these people you're thinking of, I don't know if you're thinking of people specifically, do they also put out like shirts or other merch? They do. Okay. Yeah. Because you have to, like, unless you don't care about losing money, it's purely like a hobby thing. But those are all sort of like pains in the ass you have to consider.
Right. Or people who just are touring, 300 days out of the year, but yeah, it's interesting. I've gone back to cassettes and CDs because I went to the record store the other day and everything's like $40 and I'm just like, fuck, I don't got that kind of money.
I know. Yeah. I'm wondering when it's going to swing. Yeah. It's really cool that Prophecy puts out these. I don't know if you've heard those, Brian.
No.
Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about that. So Prophecy is really cool in that it puts out these art books, which I think you're aware of. So the Botanist art book this time is an EP of trip hop tracks.
Okay.
And the trip hop tracks are 80% made from various dulcimer lines from the songs from Paleobotany that Mar took and sampled and repurposed and added her beats to, and wrote different lyrics and did different vocals to. So they're much simpler, like trip hop style songs with like one motif or maybe two motifs and a constant beat, or maybe a little bit of a change in a beat, and then these vocals. And they came out amazing because Mara's particularly good, and she's great at pretty much everything, but she's particularly good at trip hop production. She has her own project, and just had a lot of expertise in making these. And we were inspired by Hail Spirit Noir's foray into synthwave. They decided to make they're basically a black metal band from Greece, but they had like one-off record. They were going to make a synthwave record that they put out a year or two ago. And we were really inspired by that because we liked the band and loved that artistic move, and thought like we should do a one-off record, or like what would it be? And then when this came up, it was like we should make a trip hop record, and it would be so great. And it turned out to be a trip hop EP. So it's 80% of that stuff I just described, and we also cover "Teardrop" by Massive Attack, which is totally great. Yeah. And unfortunately, Prophecy is perhaps extremely exclusive with their bonus material on these things, because they really just want people to buy the full package. They want to buy the physical package. Yeah. So they don't really go out of the way to tell people what it sounds like. They don't even have a track online. You have to just buy it and then find out for yourself whether it's worth buying or not. And sometimes it's not worth buying. And sometimes it is, but you don't know until you get it.
Right.
But I think that the full package is worth buying because these tracks are really cool. And so I was thinking about like all the people that come to the Bandcamp, like they'll be able to listen to it on their own. Like hear the files, like the links to this unlisted track, and you can check out, and you can perhaps buy the full version of the record. Unfortunately, again, there's not going to be any simple CD version. Like, there's not going to be a single CD version, like an inexpensive. It's going to be like a fairly large ask, in that the CD version is the art book, which is the full record, and then there's the LP version and the digital version.